April 17th, 1906. At 5:12 a.m. tomorrow morning, the ground beneath the wealthiest city on the American West Coast will shake for less than a minute. Less than 60 seconds. That is all. 3,000 people dead, 28,000 buildings destroyed, 300,000 people, half the city, homeless overnight. And the earthquake won't even be the worst part. The fires that follow will burn for 3 days. Enrico Caruso is here tonight, the most famous opera singer in the world, performing at the Grand Opera House, who will flee his hotel tomorrow in his nightgown, screaming that God has punished San Francisco and that he will never return. Eugene Schmitz is here, the mayor, also at the opera tonight, who will give an order tomorrow morning that will kill more people than the earthquake itself. And the Chinese families of Chinatown are here, 60,000 people in the most vibrant neighborhood in the city, who will survive the earthquake and the fire, only to be driven from the relief camp so their land can be taken. They are here. They are alive. But you don't know that yet. You are getting dressed for the opera tonight. You take your time. You check the mirror twice. San Francisco is the jewel of America, the Paris of the Pacific. You earned your place in it, or you inherited it, or you arrived here with nothing and built it from the ground up, which is the most San Francisco story of all. The city smells of the bay tonight, and fresh bread from the bakeries starting their early shifts, and money, the clean mineral smell of money that soaks into a city when enough of it has passed through enough hands for long enough. You are here. Walk the city first. You have to walk it before you can understand what is about to be lost. San Francisco in 1906 is a city of 400,000 people and absolute self-belief. It was born in the gold rush, which means it was born already convinced that the impossible was available to anyone willing to reach for it. It burned to the ground in 1851 and rebuilt. It burned again in 1906, and before that. The city has always rebuilt. The city has always come back, larger and louder and more convinced of its own indestructibility. This is the foundational myth of San Francisco, and like all foundational myths, it is true enough to be dangerous. The geography is extraordinary. The hills roll up from the bay in steep, dramatic waves, and the neighborhoods climb them with the cheerful impracticality of a city that decided the views were worth the vertical. The cable cars solve the hills the way San Francisco always solves its problems, with ingenuity and a certain theatrical flair. They run on underground cables, gripping and releasing, hauling passengers up grades that would defeat every other city's public transport. The financial district sits at the foot of the hills, on the flat land near the bay. Beautiful, level, practical flat land. And it is flat for a reason you know, but do not think about this evening. The financial district is built on landfill. Sand and rubble and debris pushed into the bay to create new ground where the bay used to be. New ground. Artificial ground. Ground that has not had centuries to compact and settle and become what ground is supposed to be. In an earthquake, landfill behaves like liquid. Remember that when we get to 512. The city's water mains run directly through the fault zone. When they break tomorrow, the firefighters will have nothing to fight the flames with. Remember that when we get to the fires. Tonight, none of this matters. Tonight is the opera. The Grand Opera House on Mission Street is the finest venue west of Chicago. Tonight, it holds the cream of San Francisco society in its red velvet seats. The diamonds are out. The champagne is cold. The program for tonight reads, Carmen. And the man taking the stage for the title role is Enrico Caruso, the most celebrated tenor on earth, the man whose voice has filled the opera houses of Milan and Paris and New York, and who is, by every account, at the absolute peak of his remarkable powers. You sit in your seat and you wait for him to begin, and then he begins. The sound he produces is not something you have a category for until you hear it. A human voice shouldn't be able to do this. It fills the hall the way light fills a room, not from one direction, from everywhere simultaneously, pressing gently against your chest from inside. The audience goes completely still. Even the people who came to be seen, the ones whose eyes were still moving around the room a moment ago, cataloging whose jewels are better, whose seats are more central, go still. You go still. Mayor Eugene Schmitz is in this room tonight. He is applauding between acts. He is enjoying himself. In 8 hours, he will be standing in rubble in the street, trying to hold a dying city together with his bare hands. He does not know this. His hands are soft and clean and holding a glass of champagne. It is 10 p.m. 7 hours and 12 minutes remain. The opera ends. The applause rises. Caruso takes his bow. The audience files out onto Mission Street into the cool April night. The fog is in. It is always in. The gas lamps make gold circles in the white air. The cable cars are still running their last evening routes, their bells ringing up and down the empty hills. You walk home through streets that smell of fog and fresh sawdust, and the faint, permanent undertone of the bay. San Francisco smells like the edge of the world. That is the only accurate description. It is midnight. The opera is over. The champagne glasses are being collected. The city goes quiet, not silent. San Francisco is never fully silent. There are always the saloons in the Barbary Coast district, always the night workers on the docks, always the foghorns from the bay, low and regular, a sound you hear in your chest more than your ears. But the main voice of the city goes quiet. The cable cars stop, the crowds thin. The gas lamps glow alone on the empty streets. Below the streets, the San Andreas Fault runs the length of California. It has been building pressure for nearly 40 years, since the last significant rupture, the Pacific Plate pressing northwest against the North American Plate, 2 inches a year at a boundary 430 kilometers long. The accumulated stress is immense. It has a threshold. The threshold is very close now. The horses know. In the livery stables on Howard Street and on Folsom Street, the horses have been uneasy since evening, pressing into the corners of their stalls, rolling their eyes, not sleeping. The grooms notice and say nothing because there is nothing useful to say. You cannot explain a horse's unease. You can only watch it and wait and hope it means nothing. It is 3 a.m. The city is completely silent. You are asleep. You don't feel the silence. You don't feel the cold coming off the bay. You don't feel the ground beneath your building, beneath the foundation, beneath the bedrock, pressed past its limit and waiting for the single additional unit of force that crosses the line. The foreshock arrives at 5:12, a brief, rolling sensation, 20 seconds of moderate shaking, enough to wake you, enough to sit you upright in the dark, heart pounding, trying to understand what your body already knows. San Francisco gets small earthquakes. You have felt small earthquakes. You tell yourself, this is a small earthquake. You wait for it to stop. It stops. You breathe. It is 5:11 a.m., 1 minute, then the main shock. The rupture begins 2 miles off the coast and races north and south along the fault simultaneously, 430 kilometers of it releasing in seconds. The energy that reaches San Francisco does not announce itself. It arrives. It arrives as a deep, sub-audible roar through the earth, a sound that is felt in the bones before the ears register. Then the lateral jolt, sharp and hard, a physical blow from underground. Then the rolling, the long, continuous rolling that goes on and on well past the point where you believed it must be ending. the ground moving beneath the buildings with a slow violence that the buildings were never designed to accommodate. On the hills, on bedrock, the Victorian mansions flex. Their wooden frames absorb some of the force. The damage is severe. Many will survive. On the landfill of the financial district, the ground does what landfill does. The saturated sand and rubble begins to behave like the liquid it was 40 years ago, before someone pushed debris into it and called it land. It liquefies. It moves. The buildings sitting on it are not sitting on anything solid anymore. They are sitting on something fluid, and they respond accordingly. They do not lean. They do not crack. They drop. They fold. They are swallowed into the ground they were built on, as if the ground has simply decided to reclaim them. Caruso wakes up in his room at the Palace Hotel, and the ceiling is moving. He grabs the one thing he reaches for instinctively, a signed photograph of Theodore Roosevelt. He runs into the street in his nightgown, barefoot, shouting. He will later say he never wants to hear the word earthquake in his life again. He will take a ship back to New York immediately. He will never return to San Francisco. The shaking ends. The dust begins to rise. Then, the silence. A strange, enormous silence over a broken city, lasting perhaps 3 or 4 seconds. And then the sounds begin. First, the voices, then the hiss. The gas mains have fractured along their entire length. The pressurized gas is rising through the broken ground, through the cracked foundations, through the split floors of the ruined buildings. It finds every available ignition source, the stoves knocked sideways by the shaking, the oil lamps thrown from the walls, the kitchen fires whose embers are still warm. It finds them all, and the fires begin not in one place but in dozens of places at once, within minutes of the shaking stopping, before the dust has settled, before anyone has fully understood what has happened. The fire department responds immediately. They are professionals. They know what to do. They run the hoses to the hydrants. The hydrants are dry. The water mains that cross the fault line have ruptured in over 300 places. The entire distribution network of the city's water supply has been severed. Every hydrant in the fire zone produces nothing. The firefighters stand with empty hoses pointing at walls of flame, and they understand, with a clarity that takes your breath away from 100 years later, that they cannot win this. The mayor gives his order: shoot looters on sight. It is 10 a.m. on April 18th. The order is given verbally, never formally written, never legally authorized. Soldiers and police will kill dozens of people under this order in the hours that follow. Some of them are looters. Some of them are homeowners going back to retrieve their own possessions. Some of them are people whose skin is the wrong color and whose language the soldiers don't speak, and who therefore look to a frightened young man with a rifle in a destroyed city like a threat. The mayor's order will be one of the most controversial decisions in American history. We said we would come back to it. The army tries to stop the fires by creating fire breaks. They dynamite entire city blocks, collapsing buildings in the path of the flames to remove fuel. The theory is sound. The execution is catastrophic. The explosions scatter burning debris across the fire breaks. They start new fires in neighborhoods the original fire hadn't reached. The dynamite, intended to save the city, accelerates its destruction. And then the decision that happens quietly, with no announcement, no official order recorded for history. The relief camps open in the parks. Thousands of survivors pour into them. Into Jefferson Square, into Golden Gate Park, into the Presidio. The Chinese survivors of Chinatown, 60,000 people who have lost their homes and their businesses and their neighborhood to the same earthquake and the same fire, arrive at the relief camps and are turned away. Both San Francisco and Oakland bar Chinese survivors from the white relief camps. They are placed in separate, inadequate facilities. When their presence near Van Ness makes city officials uncomfortable, they are moved to the golf links at the Presidio, cold, exposed, separated from the rest of the city's survivors by the same prejudice that preceded the earthquake by decades and will outlast it by decades more. Because the earthquake has presented an opportunity, Chinatown occupies some of the most valuable land in the city. City officials have wanted it for commercial development for years. The earthquake and fire have cleared it. The plan is to keep the Chinese out long enough to claim the land permanently. Learn/history-culture/1906-earthquake-Chinese-treatment.htm. The Chinese community fights back. With the support of the Chinese consulate, with lawyers, with organization and sustained political pressure, they resist. They return to Chinatown. They rebuild. The land grab fails. But the camps remain separated. The relief remains unequal. The earthquake lasted less than 60 seconds. The human decisions lasted 3 days. Longer. Some of them are still lasting. The fires burn out on April 21st, 3 days after the earthquake. When the smoke clears, the city is unrecognizable. 25,000 buildings across 500 city blocks are gone. The hills are visible from the bay in ways they haven't been since before the city was built. The skyline is absent. In its place, a low, flat plain of ash and broken brick stretching from the waterfront to the western addition, interrupted here and there by walls still standing without buildings behind them, chimneys rising from nothing, a bathtub on the 3rd floor of a facade with no 2nd floor beneath it. The tent cities fill the parks. 300,000 people living in temporary shelter, cooking over open fires, drawing water from emergency supplies. They are not objective. Photographs from those weeks show something more complicated. Resilience and humor, and the particular San Francisco stubbornness that built the city in the first place. People playing cards in front of ruined houses, children running between the tents. Someone has hung a handwritten sign on a cracked wall that reads, "Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we may have to move to Oakland." The Grand Opera House is still standing. Go look at it. Walk through the ash to Mission Street and look at the building where Caruso sang Carmen the night before the world ended. The facade is still there, the walls still up. Inside, the stage where he stood, the seats where you sat, the velvet, the chandeliers, still intact inside a building surrounded by ruin. And somewhere in the rubble of the streets nearby, under the ash and the broken brick, is a program from last night's performance, printed on good paper, the ink still legible, still reading, Carmen, April 17th, 1906. The music is still in the air. You just can't hear it anymore over the silence. The silence of a city holding its breath and rebuilding.